Look at the modern pantry. Hidden behind the plastic wrappers and the cardboard boxes sits a small silver packet. Inside this packet lies a gray granular dust. The supermarket calls this instant yeast. The industrial baker calls this Saccharomyces cerevisiae. The modern consumer considers this packet essential for making bread, but the medieval survivor would look at this silver packet and see a trap. The medieval survivor would see a fragile tether to a supply chain that could snap at any moment. Here lies the great paradox of the 21st century. The modern household possesses ovens calibrated to the degree, mixers with horsepower engines, and flour bleached to pure white perfection. Yet, the bread produced in these kitchens turns to stone within 24 hours. The bread grows green mold like a festering wound within 3 days. And when eaten, this modern bread sits in the stomach like a brick, causing the gut to swell and the energy to crash. Now look back 800 years. The medieval peasant possessed no climate control. The medieval peasant possessed no refrigerator. The peasant certainly possessed no packets of isolated industrial fungus. Yet, the bread baked in a village communal oven remained edible for weeks. This ancient bread did not rot. The loaf simply dried into a durable ration. This ancient bread did not bloat the stomach. The loaf fueled the body for 12 hours of hard labor in the freezing rain. The difference is not in the flour. The difference is in the life. The modern loaf is a chemical zombie, pumped full of gas by a single strain of hyperactive fungus designed for speed. The medieval loaf was a living ecosystem. The medieval baker did not buy yeast. The baker harvested yeast from the invisible ocean of microorganisms floating in the air. This technique was not magic. This technique was biological mastery. But this mastery has been stolen. A deliberate erasure of knowledge has occurred over the last century. The food industry discovered that waiting 24 hours for a loaf to rise costs money. The food industry discovered that wild yeast is unpredictable and cannot be patented. So the industry isolated one single cell, cloned the cell 1 billion times, and sold this monoculture back to the public as the only way to bake. The industry replaced a free, infinite resource with a paid, finite product. This is planned obsolescence applied to biology itself. The result is a civilization that has forgotten how to feed itself without a barcode. The result is a population that fears gluten, unaware that the speed of fermentation, not the grain itself, often drives the toxicity. Consider the physical sensation experienced after consuming a standard supermarket sandwich. Does a heaviness settle in the abdomen? Does a fog descend upon the mind? If the answer is yes, the body is not rejecting the wheat. The body is rejecting the shortcut. The body is rejecting the absence of proper enzymatic breakdown. The time has come to stop buying the lie. The time has come to stop buying the packet. The air in every kitchen contains the spores needed to create a culture that will outlive the baker. This investigation will demonstrate how to build a trap for these invisible allies. This investigation will revive the lost science of spontaneous fermentation. The goal is not just to bake a better loaf. The goal is to sever the dependence on the industrial teat. The goal is to reclaim the oldest biotechnology on Earth. To understand the genius of the medieval method, one must first dissect the crime of the modern bakery. The standard supermarket loaf is born from a procedure known as the Chorleywood bread process. Developed in the 1960s, this process prioritizes one variable above all others: time. The industrial mixer beats the dough with such mechanical violence that the protein structure forces water absorption in minutes rather than hours. The recipe relies on excessive quantities of commercial yeast, oxidizing agents like ascorbic acid, and emulsifiers to force the dough to rise before the dough has actually fermented. The result is a biological fraud. The wheat grain contains a defense mechanism known as phytic acid. In nature, phytic acid locks up phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, iron, and zinc to prevent the seed from germinating prematurely. When humans consume unfermented wheat, the standard fast bread, this phytic acid remains active in the gut. The acid binds to minerals in the digestive tract, stealing nutrients from the body rather than providing nutrients. The consumer eats the bread but starves for the minerals. Furthermore, the protein known as gluten remains a complex, tangled chain in this rapid process. The commercial yeast gasifies the dough so quickly that the enzymes never have time to break these chains down. The human stomach struggles to dismantle these massive protein structures. The immune system often flags these proteins as invaders, leading to inflammation, lethargy, and the modern epidemic of gluten sensitivity. The industry has engineered a food product that looks like bread, smells like bread, but acts like a mild toxin. The medieval survivor operated under a different set of laws, the laws of microbiology. The ancient method did not use yeast in the singular sense. The ancient method utilized a levain, or sourdough culture, a complex, symbiotic ecosystem. This culture consists of two distinct armies working in tandem: wild yeasts, often strains like Candida malari or Saccharomyces exiguus, and lactic acid bacteria, specifically lactobacillus. This relationship is a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering. The wild yeast consumes the sugars in the flour and expels carbon dioxide to leaven the bread. Simultaneously, the lactobacillus consumes the maltose that the yeast cannot eat. In return, the bacteria produce lactic acid and acetic acid. These acids are the key. The acids lower the pH of the dough to a level where dangerous pathogens like mold, rope spores, and deadly bacteria cannot survive. The sourdough culture is a self-sterilizing environment, but the benefits extend beyond preservation. During the long, slow fermentation process, often lasting 12 to 24 hours, the acidity triggers the activation of an enzyme called phytase. This enzyme destroys the phytic acid armor of the grain. The process unlocks the iron, zinc, and magnesium, making the minerals bioavailable to the human body. Simultaneously, the bacteria begin to pre-digest the gluten proteins, breaking the complex chains into simpler amino acids. The medieval peasant was not eating raw wheat. The peasant was eating wheat that had been processed by billions of microscopic allies. The resulting bread was effectively a fermented superfood. This bread possessed a lower glycemic index, a higher mineral content, and a shelf life that defied the damp conditions of a thatched cottage. The modern baker chases the clock. The medieval baker harnessed the invisible workforce of the air. The skeptic may dismiss the medieval method as folklore. The skeptic demands peer-reviewed data. The data exists, and the data is damning. A study conducted by the Department of Soil, Plant, and Food Sciences at the University of Bari in Italy analyzed the degradation of gluten peptides in long-fermented sourdough. The researchers discovered that under specific conditions of fungal and bacterial hydrolysis, the toxicity of gluten peptides was reduced by nearly 90%. The study concluded that for many individuals with non-celiac gluten sensitivity, the problem is not the wheat. The problem is the time. History provides evidence that survives where paper rots. Archaeologists excavating the ruins of ancient Egypt have discovered desiccated loaves of bread in tombs, placed there to feed the pharaohs in the afterlife. These loaves, thousands of years old, show the distinct cellular structure of sourdough fermentation. But the most visceral proof comes from the frontiers of survival. During the Klondike Gold Rush of the 1890s, the prospectors did not carry packets of yeast into the frozen Yukon. The prospectors carried a mother dough, or sourdough starter, in a pouch strapped against their skin. The heat of the human body kept the bacterial culture alive in sub-zero temperatures. The culture was more valuable than the gold dust. If the gold was lost, the miner remained poor. If the starter died, the miner starved. This culture, Lactobacillus sanfrancisensis, was named after these survivors, not the city. The bacteria provided the acid. The wild yeast provided the gas. Together, this symbiotic colony turned a sack of dry flour into a vitamin-rich sustenance that prevented scurvy and kept men alive in the most hostile environments on Earth. The time has come to reclaim this biological asset. To catch wild yeast is to set a microscopic trap. Do not use white bleached flour. White flour is dead. The husk has been stripped, and with the husk, the dormant microbes have been removed. Use whole rye or whole wheat flour. These grains still carry the wild populations of yeast and bacteria on their skins, waiting for moisture to wake. Step 1. The substrate. Combine equal parts of whole grain flour and water by weight. Do not use tap water straight from the pipe. Modern tap water contains chlorine, a chemical weapon specifically designed to kill bacteria. Chlorine will murder the culture before the culture begins. Use filtered water, or let tap water sit in an open vessel for 24 hours to allow the chlorine to evaporate. Step 2. The trap. Mix the flour and water into a thick paste in a glass jar. Cover the jar with a breathable cloth. Linen or muslin is traditional. Secure the cloth with a string. Do not seal the jar. The culture needs to breathe oxygen, and the trap needs to remain open to catch additional fungal spores drifting in the household air. Step 3. The colonization. Place the jar in a warm corner away from direct sunlight. Now the human must learn the hardest medieval skill, patience. For the first 24 to 48 hours, nothing will happen. Then a few small bubbles will appear. This is the first breath of the colony. By day 4 or 5, the mixture will rise. A smell will emerge, not the flat smell of wet flour, but a sharp, complex aroma of ripe fruit and vinegar. This smell is the signal of success. The lactobacillus has established dominance. The pH has dropped. The trap is full. The math. Consider the economics of the survivor. A commercial yeast packet costs nearly $1 and bakes one batch. A bag of rye flour costs a few dollars and establishes a culture that regenerates infinitely. Every time the baker removes a portion of the starter to bake, the baker adds fresh flour and water to the jar. The colony feeds, multiplies, and replenishes the loss. It is a perpetual motion machine of nutrition. One investment yields a lifetime of return. The modern world views the past through a lens of arrogant pity. The modern world looks at the medieval era and sees only mud, ignorance, and darkness. The modern narrative suggests that humanity has marched in a straight line from primitive stupidity to enlightened technological supremacy. But the jar of bubbling flour on the counter tells a different story. The jar tells a story of lost sophistication. The medieval baker was not a primitive stumbler. The medieval baker was a master of applied biology. The baker did not possess a microscope to see the lactobacillus, yet the baker understood the invisible rhythms of the microbial world better than the modern technician understands the ingredients label on a package of sliced white bread. The ancestor worked with chaos. The ancestor invited the wild, unpredictable nature of the air into the home and tamed the invisible forces through observation, smell, and intuition. Contrast this with the modern condition. The modern condition is defined by sterilization and control. The modern human fears the invisible. The modern human scrubs every surface with antimicrobial chemicals, seals food in plastic vacuums, and consumes sterile products that offer calories without life. The modern human has traded the robust complexity of a natural ecosystem for the fragile predictability of a factory line. In doing so, the modern human has become a consumer in the absolute sense, one who can only devour what others have prepared. To catch wild yeast is to reject this status. To catch wild yeast is to step back into the role of the craftsman. The craftsman does not rush. The craftsman understands that good things, durable things, require time. The sourdough starter is not an app that downloads instantly. The starter is a living entity that demands a relationship. The starter requires feeding. The starter reacts to the temperature of the room and the changing of the seasons. In return for this care, the starter provides independence. When the supply chain breaks, when the trucks stop moving, when the supermarket shelves are stripped bare of the convenient silver packets, the owner of the wild culture does not panic. The owner of the wild culture possesses the means to produce food indefinitely. The jar in the corner is not just a cooking ingredient. The jar is a declaration of sovereignty. This investigation began with a critique of a loaf of bread that causes pain. It ends with a realization about the nature of survival. True survival is not about hoarding canned goods. True survival is about recovering the skills that allow existence without the system. The knowledge of fermentation is a torch passed down through 10,000 years of human history. Do not let the torch distinguish in this generation. Go to the kitchen. Mix the flour. Mix the water. Wait for the air to do the work. Stop eating the dead product of an industrial machine. Start eating the living proof of human resilience. Become the master of the invisible world.